not
All
yet.
right.
And I just think that the personalities
Are we on?
very
Okay,
different.
let me do the, there you go, okay.
Okay, Chris, your question?
Okay, so
Question?
Chris asked about our relationship to our parents.
Well, at least going individually, so that way I could get on them a bit more separate first. Unlike your father and mother and things like that.
Oh, your own parents, not the in-laws.
That afterwards.
Oh,
It's
okay.
more of so that way.
Our relationship to our own parents?
Like your opinions and how you felt about them and things like that.
Oh, well, of course, I knew everything at that age. And my parents were just struggling to figure things out. But they were very, very helpful toward the end because I realized that they were very smart, at any rate.
So you're
I had a very strict father, and he was the kind of person that was so protective that he would only allow certain people in the house, including, he would exclude his own brothers at times because his brothers
we're around.
lived differently than we did. And he
His
had
brother's idea of a good Saturday evening event was to go into a barn and have a fight.
Yeah, so there was,
Told me that.
yes, there was a reason why he was a bit
Like a range
overprotective.
fight, or you just kinda got
No,
riled
this is
up?
barroom fight.
Just-
We are
just-
talking.
Yeah, just acting nuts. I
That'd be
didn't
fun to
know
watch
about,
in a horror
I
movie.
didn't know all about that kind of stuff because Daddy didn't tell us. But I do remember my uncle calling, and you could tell that he was drunk, and because his words were slurring, and my father said, "Charlie, you can't come over here. You've been drinking," and it made my uncle really, really mad. But he was really, my dad was very protective of what was allowed into our home. And I think that my mother, who had been raised in a very proper and wonderful home,
Almost Victorian type.
very Victorian, and everything they learned. Their idea of Saturday night or Sunday afternoon
That sounds
was
great.
reciting poetry. My grandmother had a beautiful flower garden, and every weekend the house had beautiful bouquets of flowers all over the place. And they had a piano, and so the idea of entertainment was the piano, singing, and reciting poetry, which is very Victorian. But back then, they didn't have electricity. That's the
You
way it
just played
was.
it.
Yeah, that's the way Mother was raised, and her mother was very much that way. But she was one of these women that had been very, very, been loved a great deal by her parents. And she was very close to her father, who was very gentle. In a lot of ways, Billy is like that. Your father is like that. And my mother, as a little girl, was holding his hand, walking down a path and looking up and thinking to herself, I wonder if God looks like him, like Dad, you know. And of course, how many people even think of things like that, that a father would be that loving and gentle, but he was. And she grew up being very secure. Well, she married a tiger by the tail, and so when she did have the security of knowing who she was and that she had been loved. But she had a major adjustment trying to figure him out.
Did her parents support getting married to?
My mother's parents did not want her to marry my father.
I could see.
Well,
And neither did her brothers. and so it didn't turn out too good.
And how was the relationship after they married though?
Not good. Daddy was a spoiled,
I could see that.
he was not, but because of what he had endured, he came from a very abusive home. And for what he had endured, he did pretty darn well.
Right, he did very well. I was very happy to work with him, and I always admired. He had a lot of integrity, meaning he would do what he said he was going to do, and he protected those who he was supposed to protect. He was always very good about that. He took care of his brothers. He would give them jobs. He would help them. He would do all kinds of things. But he would also stand up and say, well, if you're drunk, you can't come in the house. Those kind of things. So
He would protect his daughters.
he was the oldest and the protector of his
his
family.
family, yeah.
So he was good.
Yeah, he had some issues with instability, emotional instability, but he had 5 girls.
And that would drive you.
That would definitely
Well,
create instability.
It made him very, very strict.
Cautious.
Because we were all
Ultra cautious.
very close in age, teenagers together.
And he knew
Mother
what boys
would,
like
we'd
him would have
scrap
done.
with one another if we used each other's clothing or something, but my mother never yelled. I never heard her yell a day in my life. She would say things like, girls, ladies do not behave that way, and just walk out. And we eventually caught on. But she was a very gentle person.
No.
But I had a relationship with them. It was somewhat distant, I think, emotionally distant, because couldn't quite figure out why my mother would tolerate some of the things that my father would do.
On top of that, Grandma is the middle one of the 5. And the middle one tends to be, well, actually she was the star, but they kind of acknowledge that. And the older ones kind of lead, the middle one's the star, and the younger ones get pampered, okay? So she was kind of individualistic
Yes,
by
but I
herself.
was given advantages that
But
the
she
others
had
didn't get.
one advantage that I think she had was when they moved to New York, her 2 younger sisters came with her. So she became like the oldest of the 3, and she was, to a certain extent, the protector of the 3.
You know,
Yeah, so that kind of changed the personality from being totally independent to being a protector of others. And
yes.
Grandma's always been that way,
Mhm.
that she protects people. I had a very good relationship with her parents. Her father and I would get along just fine. He, before we got married, he gave me a job working as a carpenter. And after we were married, I also did that. So in the summers, while I was going to school. I always felt he did fine. Now, his brothers were a different kind of situation. His youngest brother, Charlie, which she mentioned, had been a Marine in a machine gun, battalion, whatever it is, whatever 50 people are. Anyway, and he and one other guy came back from the Second World War. So 48 of the 50